to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Here. Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Here. We have a quorum. Let the record reflect Council President Brady is also in attendance.
Thank you very much, Council President, for joining us. Do we have anybody signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
No, no one has signed in.
Okay. And the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the December 4th meeting. Those minutes are in your packet. Does someone have a motion relative to those minutes? Okay, I heard a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And the minutes are approved from December 4th, 2017. Before we start our main discussion item, I would just like to mention that Director Keenan has told us that the 2017 year-end financials are almost ready to be reviewed. And so I'm thinking of having a meeting in 2 weeks from today on February 12th for a review. If we wait till the following week after the council meeting, that's a President's Day holiday, which complicates the schedule. So I'm thinking February 12th might be good, and I would just ask if anybody here knows if they have a problem with that date. It would be at our usual time slot Monday at 1 o'clock. What? Yeah. What? Okay. Okay, so that's looking good, and I'll check around with a few other people and let people know within a few days on that. Okay, thank you. Next item for discussion is the quarterly review of the Enterprise Resource Planning ERP program. I would call forward the administration to make that presentation.
Excuse me, can you press the button, please?
I saw a green button here. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilman Miller. We are happy to be here today from an ERP perspective to give you this quarterly update. And I wanted to at least walk you through who is going to be presenting on behalf of the ERP, as we have, as you know, we have a steering team with each of the business key stakeholders, and they will be participating heavily here today, particularly to answer some of the open questions that you have asked in a few of our earlier quarterly meetings. So walking through our agenda today, we are going to start off with our Public Works Department with Michael Dever, Director, and I believe he will be assisted by Michael Chambers. Following Department of Public Works will be the Fiscal Officer and Dennis Kennedy. Following Dennis will be our Chief Talent Officer, Douglas Dykes, to talk you through both the HR components and the change management components for the ERP and updates. And then overall, with respect to how the full project is being managed, handled, escalation items and budget, that will be me coming at the end. So any questions regarding our agenda today?
No, I'm glad that we're hearing from the various departments and can hear the perspective on what's going on in each department, so that I'm sure that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Great. So with that, I'd like to introduce Director Mike Dever on behalf of Public Works.
Good morning, members, or should I say good afternoon, members of council. Thanks for allowing us to present today on behalf of the ERP and our specific component, which is the EAM, which is Public Works is going to be utilizing.
What does EAM stand for?
Enterprise Asset Management.
Okay.
Basically going to be the work order system for Public Works. Hello, hello. Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right, so the first slide there is just a cover slide. Page 2, or should I say page 4. The agenda for Public Works, Public Works overview, the work orders as is, work orders to be, the benefits and the challenges of, and the implementation strategy and status. Next page there is page 5. Sorry, there we go. This is just to give you a brief overview of the size of Public Works and the budget. As you see, the three major budgets there are both sanitary, road and bridge, and facilities. Facilities is the largest of the three, with road and bridge right behind, and sanitary. And then the other units, be it the airport, kennel, make up those other operating budgets for a total of almost $120 million for 18. Total employees, obviously, is close to 600 also.
Hold on. Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me? No. We're having technical difficulties. Maybe our friends from IT can come visit us. I'm sure somebody isn't too far away.
While we're attending to the technical difficulties, I'll make note for the record that Councilman Tron has joined the meeting. Thank you. Is the microphone back on? Okay.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Because our road and bridge is, both of those are so significant, do you have a breakdown between what road and what bridge funding is?
So what, the split between what are we using for road and what's for bridge?
Yes.
Mike, you may need to.
Is there even a percentage? Is it 60-40? Is it
I think it's more.
70-30?
60-40. 60-40 road.
60-40 road?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like me to continue, or you want me to hold off
Please,
for a moment?
please continue.
Sure. Okay, the next page there is, once again, an overview of those three significant groups within Public Works, the facilities. 26 buildings, over 4 million square feet. When I say 26 buildings, it's like the Justice Center complex is made up of 8 buildings, including Old Courthouse, HPG, just so you have a sense of when I'm speaking on those. Work orders that come out of those, out of facilities, is roughly just over 50 work orders a day is generated from facilities. That's roughly equates to just over 13,000 work orders a year out of the facilities group. And once again, this is primarily the trades and some custodial cleanup, things of that nature. The next group next to it is road and bridge, 210 structures that were statutorily responsible, 22 miles in the township that we're responsible for, and that's 780 miles of county roads throughout the county, and that's where we partner with the communities and try and assist them on improvements. Work orders that come out of that group, roughly 30 a day, and that equates to just under 8,000 work orders a year. The sanitary group, we have 56 pump stations that we take care of, and roughly 1,500 miles of sewers. This is primarily it's sanitary sewer, but there is storm sewer for some of those communities what we maintain the storm sewers for. That 240,000 customers are those communities where we provide house service. So that's where we came up with that number of 240,000 customers. Work orders that come out of that group on a daily basis is 115 work orders on a daily basis. which equates to just over 30,000 work orders a year.
Wow.
Sorry. Okay. The next page there is our work order process as it currently as is. If you look towards the left of that page or that screen, one day, there's at the top there, and I've got some examples of the paperwork, but I just kind of spread it out for you. The daily paperwork that's generated out of the sanitary group. We also do time costing sheets, and there's roughly 400 sheets, 400 employees that are doing costing sheets. And we verify those with payroll because there's different amounts that people are being paid for certain types of work they're doing, and then how it's costed to respective jobs and communities. It's a complicated process. And then at the lower end of that, 6 months of costing, it kind of shows a file cabinet of all of that paperwork that's being generated there. The next to the right there of that same slide is 16 steps per work order. Once again, I'm just focused on the sanitary group since that's going to be our first group out of the gate here. 16 steps basically are taken care of within as a work order comes in, and that's a call that goes directly to one of our dispatchers. In turn, that dispatcher then has to direct that work to the respective supervisor, who then doles it out to their respective crews. And some of the supervisors have up to 10 crews that they're responsible for. Some of these personnel are in multiple areas. We try and put them in specific regions so that they can respond to issues in those regions. Like on the Far East side, there would be a crew that would be performing house crews, and unless it's an emergency, that crew would take care of that region in particular. What I'd like to point to on the far end, there are a couple of blue dots, if you see it, to the far right hand of that slide. That is the next set of process if we have to go through any purchasing or any item that have to go into a different system where we have to tie into it for any of the purchasing, even the payroll related items. So multiple steps, and then you go into other systems for payroll and HR and any of the purchasing items through OPD. Next slide there. This page there's 3 different slides that are really on the cover of this page here. And the first one is really a dashboard. And the dashboard can be adapted for whatever respective group, for the highest management to down to the supervisor, to try and identify, say, be it productive groups on a day, like the cost of a vehicle for maintenance on a respective vehicle, will be. So the intent of those dashboards is to give you current information so you can make business decisions on any given day. Below that is the work order system itself, and I'm sorry it's so small, and hopefully you could zoom in on it. But that's the respective work order, and then how the information is inputted, first from the dispatcher, and then ultimately to the work crew, who then input what type of work they do on it. If they need any type of equipment, materials, supplies, whatever, that's put into the work order, and then that is tracked also on the far slide. There is a costing, material costing sheet where we'll be able to track all of those respective costs, and it'll integrate with both financials, payroll, and our purchasing component. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions on that. Feel free to stop me along the way. The next slide there is basically that top slide to the left again is the GIS component. And especially when our groups our team is out in the field, the sanitary crews, we have a GIS overlay for various pieces for water lines, sewer lines. That's to give them current information in the field for wherever they're being dispatched to. They'll be able to pull down that GIS information to identify respectively what is there, from the properties to, like I said, if you get into the sanitary component, those lines are all lined up. The next item there to the lower left is basically a drawing of a floor at the Justice Center. So when the trades are going to be responding to a respective issue, say on the 6th floor of the Justice Center, we're going to download the information so that they have currently the map of the floor itself, and then also the schematics. Our intent in the future is to include the schematics of all of those systems that are within there. So when they're responding to an issue, and say it's somebody that's new to the Justice Center or has been working at Virgil Brown, he or she will be able to pull down this information and know where respective infrastructure, piping, wiring is within the walls, so that they can go to like those shut-off valves, whatnot, to try and control the situation. Next slide here, I'm going to ask Mike to step up also for this. This is streamlining our existing process, and I kind of want to just go through those respective issues that we currently have with the current system. Mike, you want to jump in there?
Mike Chambers of Public Works. I know Mike showed you the slide, but this is one pay period, and you can see there's probably 50 entries just on this first person's timesheet. So this gets keyed into my HR as 80 hours. It then gets keyed into Excel, and then it gets thirdly keyed into an Access database. This is what we're hoping to streamline first off. This is just one day of work orders at sanitary. Once again, multiple lines of data. Not all of this gets keyed into the system. It's only bare bones. It doesn't tell you the history, it doesn't tell you the weather, but the new system will have all of that at our fingertips. One of the biggest things we're trying to do is, we know, and we've known for years, that we've had systems that don't speak to each other. We're taking advantage of this work order to start from the beginning, from dispatch all the way through. Everyone has their own screen, and it's live data. It takes weeks to get this entered and to get reconciled, because it all has to tie to the payroll register. So one of the biggest problems we have is we don't have timely information. You want to know how much we're spending on a project or in the community, we have to wait for all this and all this to get keyed in. We'll have that almost daily now. The way we're going to set it up is by the end of business day, that information is to be keyed in, and we'll have some live data. One of the bigger things too is when we're doing little incidental supplies and we're buying things for projects, we order a lot of stuff for stock. We never pick that up into our expenses. Now on this work order, we're going to be able to capture all of those expenses. As you saw, one of the screens, it had the labor and it had also the prices and the parts that we're ordering. It'll all be integrated. It'll feed into purchasing. It'll feed into payroll, and then we'll have live data. Right now, we're probably at least 2 months behind talking about, December right now. We haven't even gotten that reconciled yet. So we've known that. So one of the things that we're banking on heavily is to change the way we do business. Obviously, this isn't working. I can speak on behalf of Public Works. I know we're taking it very serious, and we've asked them to eliminate all those steps. You saw all those steps and those processes from a work order. That's our number one plan. We're also looking to change the business plan, and it's basically to speed up services. I mean, one of the things you saw on today's Board of Control, we had all of these items that range under $25. A lot of this took 25,000. A lot of this took 10 to 14 days. So our men and women are out in the field, they can't work on this until we approve it today. Our goal would be, at the very bottom here, is to look at the purchasing limits, but to discuss ways of increasing those. The work order system will track every single thing we're buying. Every part number will be on there. Right now, all you're seeing is a vendor and a dollar amount. Nowhere on here are we tracking all the items that we are spending on. Eventually, after 1 year, we will have a history, be able to pull those items and then go out and bid and get better pricing. But if we increase these purchasing limits, we will have the controls within the system to really know what we're buying, which we don't know what we're buying today. We just know we have a vendor and a dollar amount. Very generic. By reducing the roadblocks, once again, is to try to eliminate this 10 to 14 days. Now our men and women aren't coming back to the job 2 and 3 times to do the work. They'll have it at their fingertips to be able to order parts, hopefully. In addition to that, the approval process. We have a budget approved by OBM. The way it is now, it has to go back to OBM every time we buy anything over $500. Mind you, it's just a click of a button, but is that really necessary? We already approved the overall budget. Within OPD, I know it goes back and forth to the buyer and the supervisor as well. These are all things that I'm hoping that we can change the business plan, through EAM and through the ERP in general. One last thing too, we spend $900 ballpark in advertising for anything over 25 grand. If we increase that to 75,000, that $1,000 we can keep in our pocket if we change our rules. That's kind of it in a nutshell about streamlining the processes. I think if you see this though, it speaks a lot more of where we're going to.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide there. The impact of the strategic methodology for the EAM rollout. Implement EAM same way for each division. Basically, the EAM is just going to be adjusted accordingly for each of the divisions. So sanitary clearly have their screens that are applicable to them. The fleet will have the same, facilities, road and bridge, print shop. There's, like I said, 4 distinct setups needed from sanitary, fleet, road and bridge, and facilities. And the results and advantages, adjusted plan to meet distinct needs, wave rollout by the divisions, focus on readiness, rollout, and stabilizing per division, and then apply the lessons we learned from each of these rollouts. And then remaining with...
You said sanitary, fleet, road and bridge, and what else?
Facilities. Road and bridge, facilities. If I'm looking at page 11, I believe. Yes. And it has them listed there.
Okay.
Next page there is basically the timeline, the wave rollout. So developing that, like I said, sanitary, a specific unit. There's 4 different units in sanitary that we're going to roll out. So we're going to start with one respective unit and then go to those other 3 and get that accomplished before we go into the other groups. So first thing we'll do then is develop audit and baseline metrics, such as what are the labor costs, stranded job cost, the work order process time, even equipment replacement and usage. You know, should we be owning? Should we be leasing? Should we be renting? There's certain pieces of equipment that are used often and some that are not. The full transition to the ERP, I'm expecting towards the end of this year. Will probably be that. And then DPW's audit and review then to make sure that we're, did it come across? Oh, sorry. And then ultimately in 19 is when we are going to be able to come back to you, and that's when we'll be evaluating our staffing needs. I know that that's a very important topic here, but it's premature for me to sit there and tell you if there's any type of specific cuts or reductions or increases. And I'm not anticipating anything like that, but I just want to make sure that I alert you that we need to get the thing up and running before I can come back and tell you specifically if there is a need for a reduction. Okay? And that takes us to slide 13. It's similar to the DPW schedule overall. There's multiple phases. And like I said, sanitary will be our first out of the box. And then we ultimately have 8 phases to this within the public works realm. The next slide there, sanitary waves 1 through 4, design and test, which has been done. We are the questionnaire, BPPs, the core team training, the CR, the requirements, fit analysis, that's been completed. We're in the process of doing the final design and sign off. We're also doing data conversions, the GIS toolbar that I referenced, and then we're going to be going into the testing phase. And so then right after that, training. So I'm anticipating in March, we are going to then start training that one respective group within sanitary about the new system. And then underneath that is really the same thing that's going to take place in those next waves. So that really brings me to the end of my my presentation, and I don't know if there's anything specific I can answer for council.
Okay, what we're going to do is at the end of each section, if people have specific questions for that department, we're going to take them, and then, but then at the end, if you miss something in the first round, we'll have an opportunity at the end where you can ask a question of any of the departments. And I had a request from Councilman Tron, so we'll let Councilman Tron go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chief, if I understood, you're planning on rolling this out officially, finally, where you start to actually get headcount and staffing needs in 2019. So you're telling this body that we're ready to venture forth on, or we've been venturing forth on $25 million worth of expenditure without any guidance or idea as far as ultimate staffing need as a result of the gaining the efficiencies and effectiveness that was laid out in this presentation.
No, I would have to say that in regards to the staffing need, we brought one person on recently in regards to the EAM component, who is going to be part of the Center of Excellence, somebody that's going to kind of mind our EAM component in the long term. She's been brought on as assistant. But as for cutting back on staff, I currently today, a work order comes in, I'm dispatching, that goes to the respective group. Then if there's a purchase of any type, that's coming over to Mike and his team, who have people that are going through that purchasing of whatever necessary item. I don't foresee a significant change in staffing within the Public Works Department for something that I'm sorry if that's not clear, but Public Works currently doesn't have a system in place, and I think we're losing a lot of unique opportunities for efficiencies within the department because we don't have current information. And at the same time, as Mike had mentioned about our business plan, about purchasing, about payroll needs, that's being missed right now because there's multiple steps within it. Mike?
Just so you know, I mean, Public Works, we are like a mini county. I mean, just because we're doing EAM right now, we also are going to be very involved with purchasing. We're going to be very involved with time and attendance. We're going to have to do a projects module. We have an inventory module. So we have to wait for the entire system to be built before we're fully integrated. We're going live with EAM right now, but it's not connecting to the purchasing. It's not connecting to the time and attendance. My staff's going to be a very vital part of each one of those departments or those implementations. And once it's all built, I think at that point in time, plus you got to remember, they got to do their same duties at the same time. So we have to, we'll be working probably a lot of extra hours. And then once it's finally built, I think we'll be in better position to come back to you and say, here's where the savings are.
I guess I'm starting kind of scratching my head figuring we didn't start with an end game in mind as far as what we're trying to strive for. And I'm not finding fault with Public Works.
Sure.
This whole project of the EAP ought to have an end game in mind. If you're taking 16 steps per work order, I assume at some point along the way there's a forecasted that's going to go to 6 steps or something of that nature.
Right.
I don't know what the magic is there. That's your current projection, and then you still have 2 blue dots at the end of those 16 steps. So I can only assume that there's got to be steps 17, 18, 19, and 20 before you actually get finished. And I don't know how many more. But isn't there somebody that's got a master of what that end game looks like under this proposal?
I just tell you, at this time, you're asking a good question, but we're only speaking for Public Works. I can stick to that. We will, because eventually when you're done, you have to audit the system. We're going to have to, keep some of those people, maybe reassign their duties. But I do believe in the end, there may be obviously, redundancy of people, and through people leaving, we'll be in a better position. You may have job titles changing. These people are going to have a lot more knowledge now to run these systems. I can envision kind of a combination of both, but I do believe in the end, you probably will see that there will be a reduction, but it won't be known until we get there.
I'm just looking at the charts that were given to us. It says streamlining existing processes. The word to me in English, streamlining means going faster, more efficient, more effective. And if we're going to use that word, where are we getting the efficiency? Where are we getting the effectiveness? Where are we getting the streamlining? If it doesn't translate into dollars, operations, cutting 16 steps,
I'll give you a quick example. I think we did 180,000 vouchers last year. On average, it probably cost us $16 to process that voucher. That came out to, I think it was $1.2 million. You're going to need some money to do that, but I can see probably right there's going to be a savings. I know Public Works did over 12,000 items last year. By streamlining that process, if we raise those limits, you won't have to be buying as many items smaller. It'd be less processing time. I can't put everything to it. I know what you're saying, but to quantify it right now wouldn't be fair. But I just know as a whole, we'll be in a better position in a year from now, certainly to redo this thing.
So we have no goals whatsoever when we started this within Public Works that we're striving towards, going towards, other than words like streamlining, words of I guess, hopes, as opposed to actual targets of, we're going to take 16 and it's going to go to 10.
No, I mean, the information live, I mean, we're 2 months behind on live data. I mean, we're going to be able to make a decision pretty much timely. We have a community that's running low on balances. We have an employee group that's not performing well. I mean, all of that information is not being captured right now. We will have metrics that we can see that and we can deal with it timely. You know, ultimately, I know you're looking at the human capital side of things, and I always, you know, that's where your expenses are. But I know for Public Works, it's going to save our communities money. If we can get our jobs done quicker, we won't be spending so much time in there. I mean, it's hard to put a dollar on that.
Okay, thank you.
Before I go to the next person, I would just like to take this opportunity to say that this is Councilman Toomer's first meeting on the Finance and Budget Committee. Congratulations. We have a number of very large, big picture financial questions to work with over the next couple of years, so it's an exciting time to be on the Finance and Budget Committee, and I look forward to working with you. And I now turn it over to the next person, Council President Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dever, I really was thinking along some of the same lines as Councilman Schron, but more specifically, can you give us some, do you have a sense of when in 19 you would be able to have a better sense of this issue? And the reason I'm raising it is with the 2019 biennial budget
Sure.
in mind.
Sure.
And are we going to be able to integrate your needs or your analysis with the 2019 budget? I hope.
Sure, I hope so also. I would say, once again, EAM's coming out, and there's a few of the modules that aren't going to be in place just yet, be it the purchasing procurement module. That's coming in later, so it'll be a later time. I feel like we'll have a better sense of this towards the end of this year of how this is going to work and if it'll be adequate. I'm sure it's going to be. Mike has kind of laid out all of the problems we currently have and lack of information. I think it's going to be very telling and very useful to this department. So I'm really looking forward to this. Like I said, we've been doing things on the back of envelopes for so many years here. They did a brief look at an EAM back in early, I think it was 2010. But they decided to hold off on that until knowing that something else was coming. 8 years later, here we are. And, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, when we start the first time out on this, I'm really optimistic, and I've got a good team behind me that are going to make this a success. So,
Well, thank you. Obviously the council is very focused on this issue, as it should be, and we look forward to working closely with you and everybody else involved to try to be helpful.
thanks, I appreciate that.
And if you would, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd just like to read a small statement. I'm going to be sending this out to the entire council in email, but I just wanted to remind you of where we're at since it's quite relevant.
Please proceed.
The council issued an RFQ for a third-party verification service for this project. The council staff reviewed the proposals from 5 firms, and we were recommending the award to what's called ZCO Consulting to be a dedicated resource for council in overseeing the ERP implementation. This contract will be on the February 13th agenda for consideration on first reading adoption with the support of the council. If you have any questions, the council staff can provide you more information, which you very well may. This firm is located in Colorado. Their principal agent is a Mr. Berzins, He spent the last 3 years working for the city of Anchorage, it's a legislative body, the city council in Anchorage, Alaska, to oversee a similar ERP project. The consulting firm was brought on in Anchorage when they were already $35 million over budget and helped the city salvage the project. They are the only firm that sought the contract with experience working directly for a legislative body in this capacity, which is not always the case, of course. Mr. Berzins will be on the site roughly 1 week per month and will participate in these quarterly meetings and will be actively engaged with the ERP project leadership, the administration, of course, in the meantime, but we'll also report obviously to the council. So we're going to try to help get to the bottom of a lot of these issues that you're concerned about and that the council is concerned about, and that's why we've brought on a consultant, as you know. So thank you.
Generally, I'm not a supporter of the council having separate consulting services. I think generally we should do that with the administration. But this is an exceptional situation. It's a project of a size and complexity that we haven't seen before, and for that reason, I fully support the council president's leadership on this issue, and I'm sure that this consultant will be helpful not only to the council but to the county as a whole. Thank you very much. Ms. Councilwoman Chantel Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You spoke about first of all, I want to thank you for the presentation. I did find it very helpful to learn about how the system currently works and how it will transition from live data to the live data system. You talked about going from 25 to 75K as it relates to the Board of Controls. Would that be exclusive to Public Works, the Public Works Department?
I don't think it would be. I think the intent is that the ERP is being rolled out for everybody. But that's a legislative decision.
I was going to say, is that in discussion right now?
We can see the need for increasing those limits, Public Works specifically. And I think it's been discussed back and forth. As for the proper legislation for that, I don't think that's been introduced. But Public Works would be very supportive of that effort.
And how did we settle on 75 versus 50K? Where did that magic number come from? Can you speak to that point?
The whole point of that conversation is we're changing our business plan. I was just trying to explain to you, if we raise those thresholds, we can get things done more timely. I mean, it could be 50,000. I mean, it's open for discussion, but we spend an awful lot of money processing items, and if we can, increase those thresholds, maybe we don't have to process as many, save a little bit of money. But those are just exact, get a couple of vehicles. I mean, it takes us 6 months to buy vehicles. If we raise some of those limits to 75, we can probably buy 2 vehicles in 3 weeks versus 3 to 6 months.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So, because that was one of the things I was going to ask, if you could explain how it would benefit and reduce the cost or increase the savings and productivity, as you expressed. It's now a 10 to 15 day hold for some of these items that you're looking to purchase?
It's not a hold, it's just the way we do business. We have a cutoff on Thursday to get the items through OPD, Thursday at noon, so that we can review them the following Wednesday with the executive, and then it comes on this month, today's agenda. So you look at all those days together, when you have something broke down, especially in sanitary, we have we're working for those communities, and we got to wait 10 to 15 days to put a sewer cap in the street. I know we have mission critical, and we've done a lot of things to try and improve that, but the point we're trying to get is our men and women have to go back there 2 and 3 times. If we can get that stuff same day, not only are, if it's your office, you're not inconvenienced, it's repaired quicker. There's a lot of money, a lot of time that, you can't quantify in dollars by doing that, by increasing these thresholds.
Okay, so, and just one last point, Mr. Chair. So if we were to increase those thresholds, it sounds like to Councilman Schrein and Council President Brady's point, if we go with the live data, then we should be able to get a handle on budgetary numbers a lot sooner than later.
Yeah, I'd like to stress too, I'm not saying we're skirting. You guys should have access. You can run your queries and send the emails, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. And in fact, if it goes the way I'm hoping, you'll be able to see the detail behind that, $24,000 amount, what we're actually buying. And then, like I said, in a year from now, we can take that information, which we don't have now, and try and get better pricing.
Okay,
So, yeah.
thank you.
So, am I correct, the 50 to 75,000 has to do with the threshold for when you can use an informal as opposed to a formal
Correct.
RFP process?
Anything over 25,000, but I was just using it to buy a couple of vehicles, for example. And then the other thing is currently, and that's a good point, right now, anything under 500, we can give our men and women a green light. I'd like to raise that, 2,500 to 5,000, same thing, you really can't buy a lot for $500. So if I can raise that threshold, as well, working with OPD and everyone else, once again, we can solve our problems the same day. We can run and get that stuff. We can implement blanket orders, which we can do, contracts with each person without actually encumbering money. There's a lot of different ways we can change our plan. The whole point of that conversation was now's the time to kind of start, talk about it.
Thanks very much, Councilman Gallagher. And then followed, what? And Councilman Schwan, followed by Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please understand, I love your enthusiasm, and I ask, hopefully, questions that are fair may be tough, but I always hope I do with that. When you went down this, or you're going down this path on installing an EAP system, have you ever done this before at a organization, a corporate-wide, organizational-wide EAP system?
No, I haven't. What I can tell you is that there was a group, Greensboro, North Carolina, implemented this same system a few years ago, and we've been in contact back and forth with them for the challenges that they've faced implementing the EAM, because it's a community of almost 300,000 people, and they have buildings, sewers, water lines, all of the similar things that we're going to be dealing with. So they've been very helpful in kind of providing the roadmap, showing us where you're going to have trouble areas. So it's been helpful. But as for myself implementing, no. And as for my staff,
I have, yeah. Back in the 90s, I was with Cleveland when they brought PeopleSoft in 2001. They had Famous similar to us, but they designed PeopleSoft to mirror exactly what they're doing. They didn't try and change the business plan, and in all honesty, it failed. They spent a fortune in consultants. They couldn't do upgrades because they configured it so much. They changed the code to match what they're doing now. They ended up, kicking that out and went with something differently. But that's why I'm saying we need to change the business plan. I just think that's important.
All right, so they made the classic mistake of trying to change the software to match what they were doing as far as old technologies, as opposed to adopting and going forward with the new generation where things move. And it's a fairly classic mistake. And I applaud you, but I can only assume that you're coming into this with some expectation that you would see some savings, some time, some efficiency, some streamlining, and part of that is on a faith-based approach that people have told you that you're going to see these things. Is that, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I can only assume that some of this is coming from the experts that we brought on staff to tell you that we're going to do this, and I would like to hope that they painted a picture of what the future looks like.
Yeah, one thing I would look at is process time for all these work orders. Right now, we don't have live data, how much time is put into a respective work order, be it fixing these light fixtures within this building, going for the purchasing, all of that time that's wrapped into the man hours of people doing that. I know we are going to see savings once I have that information. And we'll find out, what type of productivity of the differing crews doing the exact same work. It's in the long run here, this is a net benefit for Public Works.
Did those in leadership who were carrying on the heavy lifting of this project, when they came and talked to you guys, give you some kind of expectation of what you're going to see or what you think you should see, at least as a range?
A dollar? Are you trying to get to
everything,
a dollar figure?
Everything translates to dollars, sorry, or percentages.
I think when Mike speaks about those purchasing items, I think there's challenges with that, and hopefully we can, that business plan, and that's something for the county to agree on. How many times do we need to bring that to the Board of Control for a review? I think a group that you actually steered us to, Councilman Schron, the procurement specialist group, I think someone that works for you is the leader of that group. They were astounded by the time it takes for the county to process things. And they can see how the county loses money. So,
But I'm going to the folks who are actually running the project. Did they say, hey, you should be able to see a range from 0 to X? And did they ever set you this aspirational goal that you think you're going to achieve in Public Works?
sure, there's some information that came specifically from this group called Clash of Titans.
No, our internal people.
Our internal people. You know, we've had numerous the availability of information, productivity and efficiency. They have percentages clearly laid out here of how you should see that. And these are businesses that have gone through multiple ERP improvements over the last 35 years.
Okay.
It's been 35 years.
Those are outside organizations?
That's correct.
Those are not coming from our internal staff?
No.
Didn't set you a goal? Okay. I agree 100% to take and set a higher threshold. I mean, when I was in the military, we actually went to $100,000 was the threshold goal, to Ms. Brown's comments, and they put that up to that much could be done on a credit card. That was 10 years ago, so I know that there are extreme efficiencies that can be gained just by changing the threshold out there, and there's plenty of other ways to monitor it if you even bump it up there. So I applaud you on wanting to bump it up, get it out of the worry. Some of my colleagues know where I wanted the Public Works to be able to spend money up to, but we didn't get to that limit. But maybe it's time to even revisit some of those things. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
Yes, thank you. Did I hear you say that perhaps maybe a reason why it may be difficult to put your arms around the savings with a percentage or number is because there's many missed opportunities that will maybe be absorbed by the efficiencies that we're going to see, that there may be more jobs, more work, more a broadening of what's really going on out there that can be studied that is not being done now? Is there some perhaps benefits to our communities that they'll see enhanced because of the efficiencies that you have saved, that on the bottom line, we may or may not see those dollars, but in work, we see more being done? Is there some of that going on perhaps in why it's hard to put your arms around it?
That's absolutely true. I think it was 2 years ago we put GPS in our vehicles and we saw a spike. But once again, you know, there's always tricks to the trade. They now know to be in that community. And our goal here is, as the director said, how much time does it take to jet that line? You know, what's the average? We don't have that. We're not capturing all that data. Now in the work order system, we'll be able to say, hey, truck A did 1,000 feet today and truck B, you only did 300. Yes, you were in that community. Yes, you're billing that community, but you know, that community has to pay for that. So once again, we'll be able to put these metrics and see what we can do. The same thing with our vehicles. How much money have we put into them? When do we call it quit? Right now I'm relying on our supervisor to go through his paper file, but we here can have metrics. Just this vehicle here, we just put, you know, X amount of dollars in the last 2 years. Once again, we don't want to be putting bad money into, you know, good money into a bad thing. So yes, there's a lot of efficiencies. When we do projects, we have all these stock items. I would guess hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're not capturing in our projects. It ends up getting thrown into overhead. Those will be now linked to the work order. We'll have an item on there. They can just start putting it right into the work order as well. So yes, tremendous.
I may
amount.
follow. So I think that what I would want to hear when we start talking about evaluating staffing needs, that if we thought there would be more staffing needs that would have perhaps either through attrition or changing of their roles, that also if we had a number value or a quantitative overview of what more you got done out there because you were already out there, you knew it needed to be done, didn't fit in the budget the way the budget was perhaps earlier, but because of the savings, you were able then to include this much more work, whether it's sewer or road or bridge or anything else that you're trying to get done, that would be also a savings, even though it's not in dollars, it's a savings in work that you're able to accomplish that perhaps you wouldn't have before. That, I think, would be an important footnote for us to know if the savings in personnel wasn't as high as what we thought it would be, but it's because you're doing more with that, with the efficiencies than you would have been able to before. Is that something that you're just kind of in the,
I think we can pull something together in regards to that. One other thing, the sanitary, we're under contract with those communities. If we're not performing, and we need to perform against the private sector. If not, they can go in another direction.
yeah,
So it's very important for us to be just as productive as the private sector. And they don't have the constraints on them that we do.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We will
Thank you. Thank you.
hear from Director Kennedy next.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to all the members on the committee and guests. In light of the chairman's request, I'd just like to give you a summary of where we're at right now, particularly focused on the fiscal operations, and then give you some idea of some of the challenges that we face, particularly over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And I would also be happy to follow up on the discussion about the purchasing limits and give you a little more additional background on that, on why that may be something that we want to consider perhaps prior to implementation. So with respect to our the fiscal and procurement operations of the county, the most significant contributing factor of the county's financial operating issues is attributed to the number of standalone financial systems used by various agencies and departments. The lack of an integrated financial system has caused a number of operational issues. Number one, our current systems are old or considered ancient in some cases and difficult to change and customize and extract data from. We've had reconciliation complications, which have been mentioned in several audit reports, between different systems because there is no interchange of data based on how they were originally designed under the old elected officials form of government. We have duplicate data entry by multiple sources across different systems. So one person has to put something in one system, then somebody has to put it in another, and those two items have to be merged currently. I think everybody has struggled with the lack of real-time budgetary data in financial reports that are available not only to the council, but management on the administrative side of the county. There's a lot of uploads and interfaces that need to be done to tie our financial system to our budget system. With all the complications of entering things twice, or in some cases 3 times, that increases the propensity for errors that go into the system, which take a lot of time and attention on the back end to straighten out, particularly in the area of reconciliations. We'd hope to increase, as both Mr. Dever and Mr. Chambers said, we want to increase the processing times of transactions. Right now, where we sit today, we have a brass system for budget. We have MyHR for human resources. That's supported both by Oracle and SAP. The accounting system is based in what's called Famous, which is a late 1980s version software. We have BuySpeed and OnBase to be used for procurement, and there's a number of other subsystems that are part of like Microsoft Office Suite. So all those systems right now operate independently. They're managed and administered independently. There's complications by doing that. It requires more people, more checking, more cross-checking. So ultimately what we'd like to do is get rid of all those systems and everybody's working out of the same pie so that we all have the same data and one system does not have data that conflicts or is not on the same time period base as the other system.
The financial system was which?
Famous is the accounting system of the county. Brass is the budget system. So those two systems currently do not speak to each other, except on a basically a monthly upload interface that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and in some cases has to be supported by manual entry, preparation of Excel spreadsheets, and that type of thing. One of the complications that we face with the number of different systems we use now is it's a control weakness. We don't have a lot of audit trail information to show where something went into the system, how it was changed as it moved through the system, or even when it was converted to be taken into account by another system. So one system is going to allow us to better monitor how transactions flow through the system. We spend considerable time in each department. I'm sure that was some of the references to Public Works in terms of reconciling your own data and compared to what we need to do from an overall standpoint, particularly with the preparation of financial statements. So our vision of this new ERP system is that we'll provide an integrated enterprise financial system that will support fiscal staff in the delivery of all services and take advantage of best practices and significantly improve efficiency and effectiveness of the fiscal officer's customer service and business processes. And we talk about customer service, that's both internal and external to the county, because the treasurer's office has their own system. We have our own accounting system, so we can help not only the information that we're using for our financial statements, but to help outside agencies handle their business, and in the case of our residents, to help with more accurate compilations of, for example, treasury data in terms of taxes paid. So our goal in all this at the beginning was to retire our current legacy systems and allow for all budgeting, financial reporting, accounts payable, payroll, grants management, asset management, and procurement functions to be housed in one single integrated system. So to give you an example, currently how things are, to purchase an item now, a user would have to enter information or validate information from several different systems. We would need to have that person check into Brass and or Famous and to work with the Office of Budget Management, determine, first of all, if they have enough funding to make the purchase. And that's going external to that person's accessibility. If the funds are available, that person would have to enter the information into the procurement systems, which is buy, speed, and on-base, where it goes through a procurement approval process. During that approval process, that goes through a number of different steps. That's usually in the category of 2 to 3 different reviews. There's also a budget review performed by the Office of Budget Management to make sure funds are available in case the user did not check the budget prior to entering the purchase request in one of those procurement systems. Once the purchase is approved by either council or the Board of Control, a purchase order would be then produced. Then that purchase order is given to the accounts payable staff to encumber, which is a whole different process, in Famous, which is our system of record. So you can see it's going through the budget system, it's going through the procurement system, and then a piece of paper ultimately is generated that goes to a department where those folks then enter that information into the accounting system. And at every one of those steps, something can go wrong. So how we want it to be, we want it to be when a user in a department wants to make a purchase, that person can enter a requisition directly into the system. As soon as that requisition is entered, we'll be able to tell whether or not there's appropriation to account for that purchase prior to it moving down the line. Right now, that's a encompassing process that goes through because the systems are not integrated and up to date. So we can have that one person enter the requisition goes into a budget review in the system. If there's sufficient budget to move it, the requisition will get routed at each step of the way through the system for either a budget review, a confirmation, a procurement review to determine if it's under or over the purchasing limits to direct which direction it'll go, whether it has to go to the Board of Control, to council, whether we can issue directly a purchase order for it. So as a result of using this integrated system, we'll not have to have the budget reviewed individually for each purchase, nor will the accounts payable department have to enter that information in a separate system to officially encumber the money in our system of record. All those functions will be handled internal to the system, better controls, saves time, we don't lose things. And there's other benefits that we could get out of the system, particularly if the item that's being proposed to be purchased is a capital asset. I mean, we don't have any direct methodology for tracking capital assets in a centralized system. This system will be used not only for procurement, but for inventory of where everything's at. The system has some great capabilities related to the capital asset accounting, and it'll be easier for us to extract information from that to prepare both our monthly financial reports, quarterly reports, and year end. As I said in the opening remarks, we've received audit citations over the past several years for a number of things that are basically a result of the way our systems are configured. We had substantial discussions in the last several years about the difference in the reconciled balance between our bank and our book. That's mainly because we cannot reconcile the Treasurer's World system and Famous, which is our accounting system. We are in the process of going back. We've expended some funds on a consultant to come in and help us with some technology that they feel can go back and trace some of those things. But as we've said in the audit, both the audit committee meetings and the meetings with council, that's a problem that we don't anticipate reoccurring with one system. The problem right now is simply because we have two separate systems and they really haven't been balanced or reconciled in the past 15 years. So we're going back to look for 15 years of data. When we come to an agreement of what the numbers are moving forward, we'll have one system. So we'll be able to track and reconcile our balances every month. Another item that comes up on the audit side is adjustments to our federal schedule. With this particular software that Infor is providing, we'll be able to centralize all our accounting information from grants in one system as opposed to being deployed in multiple systems or subsidiary ledgers in outside agency. We've received budgetary citations. The new system will give us more control, as I said earlier, to make sure that transactions that go in on the front end are supported by adequate appropriation as opposed to us realizing after the fact because of timing differences that we did not have sufficient appropriations. At the end of the year, when we reconcile all our appropriations versus our budget certificate, it's those instances that we get cited if we have spent too much money, but the current configuration of the system is not conducive to us getting that information on a regular basis. The new system will. We'll be able to, one of the citations we get every year is that the fiscal officer does not physically sign every encumbrance that's done, which I can attest to is practically impossible. I'd be doing nothing but signing pieces of paper. I do sign a lot as it is, but the new process will satisfy the auditor's issues in terms of integrity of the acknowledgement that the funds are available. So that whole certification process will be automated and will be referenced to the auditors in terms of their ability to go in and look at the control features to make sure that every time that funds are certified, that there is appropriation to support the purchase. We'll have better safeguards on personal information. Our older systems have pretty antiquated vendor files that were not configured with all the controls and bells and whistles that you see today. I'm sure everybody knows all the problems with personal privacy and probably all the different steps you have to go through even to safeguard your online access to your bank account or to a credit card. Our current accounting system doesn't have those capabilities, so we'll be in a better position to control access to the data have better information related to the vendors and allow ourselves to be more compliant in terms of the checks that the auditor does on the back end. We expect to have the same benefits generated out of payroll because of the number of different systems that are used right now to compile and process payroll. Centralization into one will be an extreme benefit that we will realize once the system's operational. Will, as the Public Works presentation indicated, we'll be able to automate a number of different workflows in approval of transactions within the system, as opposed to having documents that flow through the building or in some cases outside the building for review. So currently the fiscal department uses a manual paper-oriented approval process for accounts payable, procurement, and journal entries. There's a lot of potential for error in that. It takes a long time for a piece of paper to get around. It gets lost. And this will be more controlled by us because the system, the security of the system will be set in terms of a hierarchy to make sure that the appropriate people are approving each level. Right now, there's no guarantee of that because of the paper copies. So we're going to look to transform our existing business activities, the roles and the tasks from our current systems into a centralized automated structure. Approvals for things like invoices, requisitions, and journal entries, those all be managed digitally through an organized workflow that we're going to design. And an automated workflow solution should bring a number of benefits, such as a reduction in errors, improved communication, reduced cost, increased visibility, and increased organization for the users, because the users will be able to physically see the status of all their input or their transactions, as opposed to having to contact us to go back and do a compilation to give them kind of a status update. And the benefit to everybody is obviously real-time reports. So the budget system will operate off the same database as the financial system. There'll be no need to reconcile those two. And we can produce reports, particularly for council, that I think are a little more manageable in terms of putting particular information before you in a design that you stipulate so that you can see better where we're at any given point in time. And from that standpoint, not only the folks, for example, on the council staff, but internally can go in and basically query their reports and see pretty much on a daily basis where we're at in terms of current year appropriation, current year spending, current year encumbrances, and available balance. And that will also tie into all the different funds that we have. So we hope to have access to more timely and reliable information that should help us in decision support. Again, we're going to use this opportunity as a full-scale review of everything to try and incorporate as many best business practices we can. We hope to streamline all the reconciliations and optimize some of our other business processes and provide people more tools in the department. You heard both Mikes talk about it, to have information pretty much at their fingertips, as opposed to either having to compile something or get the information from another department. And there could be then a conflict in terms of how accurate that information is. And from a financial control standpoint, we want to have better audit trails so that we improve our reviews with the state auditor. So right now that process is very complicated because of all the manual entries. We have to pull vouchers for them. There's a lot of paper that goes into the background of that, particularly if something's on the purchasing side. There's mounds and mounds of paper that go into one particular transaction. All that's going to be stored digitally now, so it'll be accessible not only by our staff, but be accessible by the auditors when they come in to do their work. So hopefully we can show some reduction in the overall audit expense in future years. So the image and use of archived documents created by the system will extend to purchase orders, payroll checks, accounts payable checks, W-2s, 1099s. We'll have manually scanned images for any supporting information that is relevant to the purchase. And that'll get us more information, more background that's at our fingertips so that we can get that information on a more timely basis to anybody that's inquiring. That could be a vendor. Right now, when a vendor calls our office and has an issue about a payment, or particularly in a lack of payment, it takes considerable effort to go back and trace all the steps that are related to that particular transaction, pull files, have somebody take a look at those, determine basically by eyesight what the problem is. All that information literally will be available to somebody at a computer while they're still on the phone with the vendor. So you'll be able to call up all the information, look to see where they're at, when the invoice came in, how it was routed, what was originally authorized, and so on. So it's going to be better in terms of customer service, and that should help us not only with our business partners, but with the residents. I'm sorry.
I think there's a general recognition that the ERP system potentially has a broad range of substantial benefits. But what we would really like to know and is for you to tell us more about the process of actually implementing the system in your department and what the schedule is, how it's proceeding, what things are going well, what things are not going so well. That's more of what we're looking for. We're kind of willing to stipulate to the first part that that the potential benefits are there.
In terms of, Mr. Chair, in terms of the challenges from this point on, there's a number of different competing priorities that basically the same group or the same staff is dealing with. As you're aware, we're replacing the real property tax system at this point in time. A lot of the folks that are involved in management of that project either have direct or secondary involvement in the ERP project. Most of the folks that work in my area have to deal with the auditors and we have to produce the information, the reports under our current systems right now to stay compliant with the auditors. So the folks are doing the day-to-day work and they're also doing the project work, which is a considerable impasse in terms of having enough hours to get those done. We haven't added any people to deal with the project. I know there was some talk about what the projected savings would be. From our standpoint, we did put in our budget a reduction of $300,000 a year. I've asked all the staff and the managers to take a look at any opportunity that we have. If somebody's leaving, if somebody's retiring, that how can we potentially consolidate that position to accommodate some of the efficiencies that we're going to realize. You know, if you got to pass the piece of paper 3 times and it's going through a system, you would think you're only going to need one person to handle that transaction basis. So we are taking a look at those things as we move forward. But our biggest challenge at this point is all the competing priorities with what's going on with the other system designs, the audit, those types of things. We're on base or on schedule right now to move forward with the general ledger, accounts payable, project accounting, our cash book, accounts receivable, flexible budgeting, purchase orders and requisitions. So somewhere later down the line, we're going to have to implement some modules that related to advanced budgeting and forecasting, grants management, asset management, and expense management, which is like employee reimbursements and that type of thing. So we're taking between now and summer the modules that we're confident we can get implemented, tested correctly, and installed. And there's a number of different secondary levels, both in public works and some with HR, that our system has to get up and running first so they can kind of tie into that. It's too much to believe that we're going to get everything from A to Z installed in the next 6 months. So we're realistically, and I think there'll be some discussion later about future project schedule, about how things have been moved around a bit to accommodate it. But our biggest challenge internally is just the number of resources we have in the short term to do not only the day-to-day and support these other projects, but to also dedicate the necessary time to these particular testing, design, all the different features that go with the ERP. The Treasurer's Office will realize some benefits from this. We've asked them to look at how they're conducting their business, and we would expect that we would realize some kind of savings there, because the system that they're going to be using now is probably going to be much more robust than what they have now and require less manual attention to the details. I'd be happy to address the issue of purchasing limits that I think was brought up by Public Works. The purchasing limits, the way that it could impact the efficiency of the system is because it'll divert things in terms of how the process is designed. Right now, currently, if expenditure is more than $500, it gets routed through to the Board of Control, which means it has to be entered into a system, it has to pass through an agenda process, it has to go to a preliminary review meeting. So you're talking about something that's $502 that will take you probably, their estimate was probably correct, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 11 days to get that done. As a benchmark, I've been finance director in 3 different cities, and in all those cities, I think the lowest approval value that was the responsibility of the finance director was $25,000. So in essence, the case could be made that we could handle a majority of those internal transactions, and that's particularly what you're paying us to do, to review something, as opposed to having 6 or 7 people sit on a public body to approve something that's $503. I think that will help the process. We need to have some discussion with the council staff about that, because that's going to have to be embedded in the design. But I think that'll help speed some things up. I'm not necessarily convinced that's going to save you any money, except for if you're measuring time and attention to something, but it will produce some kind of efficiencies. It'll allow us to move a little quicker where we need to do so. So we'd be happy to have those communications with the council staff in the future. But I would support the recommendation that came out of Public Works, that we at least take a look at it.
And Director, what's the projected target date for the first rollout of any part of the ERP system within your department?
Our current plans are to go live in June of this year with a number of those preliminary modules that I mentioned. Again, we're focusing on the ones that need to get implemented and installed, so that the others that are necessary to tie into those can be functional as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions by my colleagues? Director Sean, to Councilman Tron.
I don't want his job. He's got a lot of work to do. I don't want to be the director over there. You were brought in late into the project, as I recall. You weren't there at the beginning.
I got here in late March, early April of 2015. When I arrived, they were already doing vendor presentations. Like, the RFP had already been designed, bid out, and there was, I think, originally 3 respondents, which was then cut back to 2. But they were doing vendor presentations of the software over at the convention center.
You weren't involved with that part, so as I recall.
Not that part, because I did not have the background at that point to have made any kind of judgment on the RFP.
I think last time when you were before us, there was a question of accrual versus cash in the layout of the system, I think, or something of that nature came up. Has that been decided finally?
We are, yes, sir, we are on a cash basis as we are.
Well, I know we are on a cash basis, but I thought there was some issue about programming or design of the system as to how it was being structurally set up.
I think that's been resolved, Mr. Schron, so we are definitely going forward with the design on a cash basis.
Okay, all right. Will this help our loan program and our county loan program as to whether it falls into your area or economic development or a combination as we're using a common system?
I believe there's some opportunities for that to occur. They use a separate standalone portfolio system right now to track all their loan activity, but we should at some future point take a look at how we migrate that data into the ERP, particularly from a control standpoint, where we know that when a loan is awarded, that money gets set aside in the system. So we don't run the risk of over appropriating in terms of loans. And we can also keep that money segregated so that there's a limit on how much money can be expended against it. So I look forward to having some opportunities to improve that, yes.
Well, I assume the money is going to flow from your department over into some functional area for economic development.
Yes, sir. It would be, we're trying to go with a, one-stop shop. So any kind of requisition that requires an outlay of money on behalf of the county or a commitment to appropriation would start in the ERP system and then funnel backwards to the subsidiary ledgers of the departments if they needed it.
Okay, so we will have some checks and balances from your department over to economic development department, and hopefully vice versa as the funds flow back into your department.
Yes, sir.
Because they're not going to hold money, certainly in economic development.
That's correct. Yes.
When you go live in June, Chairman Miller's question, will you be going live on a dual basis, or is it going to be a hard cutover where you're not creating dual systems?
Well, our intention is to use the system in its full functionality as we go live, but there's going to be subordinate units that are not going to be implemented by then. But the sooner that we can get off, and I'll let the technology people explain better, that assuming all the data conversion goes correctly, then yes, we would be going off that system as of the date we pull the switch.
So if you're going live with purchasing, for example, you're going to go and create purchase orders under the new system. You're not going to create a dual purchase order, one in the old system and one in the new. Sometimes going live, people create redundancy, and I'm just trying to ask which way you're.
No, our intention is to use this once it's functional. We are proposing to use a dual entry system for the real property tax system, just because there's going to be so much information related to the parcels and the appraisal. So in that case, we are using kind of a dual system for a period of months just to make sure the data flows through correctly. But here we'll be ready to go. The sooner the better, because then we can retire those old legacy systems and stop making the annual maintenance payments on those.
But those won't be able to talk to the old systems. So you're going to have some way of at least be able to retrieve the data, I assume.
Yeah, there'll be a whole data archive that'll be accessible. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you indicated that the purchasing design limit system would be helpful and could be impactful to the design of what we're going forward with.
It's basically right now we're designing an accounting system. The limits and which direction something goes, if you think of a flow chart, would be impacted by what those different limits are. Right now it's being constructed as our current state is, so anything over $500 has to get routed through a process where it ultimately goes to an agenda so it can get on a board of control. What we're saying is if that purchasing limit was, for example, raised to $25,000, those would be reviewed and approved by the fiscal office as opposed to having to go through an agenda system and then end up on a board of control.
It just seems like that would have been an early checkoff that somebody would have been discussing this point 6 months ago, or maybe way before that, to get that limit number established, because it does start to lay out design characteristics, as you point out, that it can be impactful. When did this, I mean, this is a big deal. Because I'll be willing to bet, if you go from 500 to 25,000, you're changing probably 60% of, I'd be willing to bet, of documents that are going to flow through. Maybe even more. I have no idea what the percentage is, but I'll bet it's a pretty high percent that you're going to be cutting off. It seems to me that this should have been an early on, whether it's 25, 50, 75, those would have been discussions that should have been made way in the early design function of this.
Well, Mr. Schrein, I did have some discussions with the council staff in the past about this. Right now, it's being designed as a matrix, which means if you change the number, because, at some point you can't assume that it's always going to be whatever, 25,000. It could be lowered. It could be. So from a matrix standpoint, I believe the capability's there. We did have some preliminary discussions a while back. Most of those spending limits that were put in place were because of the change in the government, and there was more control and more restrictions on things. So we're comfortable that the design can be accommodated rather quickly to make those changes, and we would look forward to entertaining those discussions with your staff again in the immediate future.
Okay, well, I guess your one comment was you're not sure it's going to save money. I think hearing from Public Works, if they're out on a job site and they can save 3 or 4 days because they're already out there scheduled, and we can save on a procurement, man, it's time is money. And so I just can't help but think it's going to save us money if we can streamline the process, using the word from their presentation. So I hope you guys pick a number that's big enough that could actually help streamline the process. Thank you.
And the efficiencies, I was saying, basically from the standpoint of the fiscal office. I can't see there was.
Because I think out there in the Public Works, it should save us money to have to not set up a second bringing out of equipment and things of that nature. If we can streamline that.
And in other outside agencies.
Yeah, it was just only because that was the last presentation that was brought up.
Director, much concern has been raised about delinquent property tax collection. Does this system afford us any opportunities in that area? And if so, how could they be achieved?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure of the potential benefits of this system outside of more timely access to information. I think our capabilities to make improvements on delinquencies would be more in the Harris real property tax system. But again, the benefits we have now is uploading information, making it more virtual. It takes us a while, once collections are closed, to even compile accurate data as to where we're at, how much went in the bank from the collection period. That would be something that would be available to us immediately. But I think the better management tools are going to be in the other system.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Baker.
Yes. What's maybe concerning, and I'm sure you can answer this and don't have to go into much detail, but when I hear less eyes, less handling, one-stop shop, efficiencies faster, do you feel very confident you have the safeguards in place to perhaps find any misuse, any mishandling of money, anything that maybe all these different steps someone would perhaps raise a red flag to say, hey, this doesn't look right? Do you have, through our effort to be more efficient and save money and personnel and all that, that you also have what we need to make sure that things are as they should be, as far as any spending of money or anything that's not perhaps as handled as it is today?
Ms. Baker, I'd say from both an efficiency standpoint and a control standpoint, I'll feel much more comfortable with this system and that could accommodate a reduction in staff as well. But the system will block anything from happening that you don't want it to happen. And it'll block anybody who doesn't have access to make something happen from trying to make something happen. I can't say that exists now because of the manual way things are done. Things are done behind the scenes. Things are rushed through. Things are walked on agendas. I would think that the new system will be far and above better than, in terms of an internal control standpoint, than we have right now, regardless of the number of people. If you gave me 25 more people to improve the controls, I'd rather take the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, if there's no objection, we're going to suspend the ERP discussion and take our one piece of legislation to make sure that we get that done today. And hopefully there will be time. We'll see how quickly we do the legislation, and hopefully we'll have time to do a little more on the ERP. So I would ask if the clerk could please read Resolution 2018-0010.
Resolution number 2018-0010, authorizing the use of a portion of the proceeds of the Cuyahoga County Sales Tax Revenue Bonds Series 2014 County Facilities Improvement in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $24 million.
Councilman Gallagher, please don't go far. We need you for a quorum. Director.
Good afternoon, Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget and Management. So the legislation before council today is to approve the cash transfers that have previously taken place from bond proceeds from the 2014 sales tax issue to the demolition fund. Originally, council had approved repurposing those dollars to the tune of $2 million, but subsequent to that, we processed cash transfers with council's approval totaling $14 million from the data center project and $8 million from the emergency operations center project. But we did not have legislation from council to repurpose those dollars. So what we're seeking now is to amend the initial legislation so that we can go up to the $24 million.
So, Councilman Tron.
So move.
Second.
So, Director, this legislation amends the bond legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, what previously was this money to be used for?
Well, originally, when the county issued the debt in 2015, there were, I think, 12 or 15 projects that had been identified, totaling $102 million. In the course of going through those projects, though, some of them fell off the list. Some of them we took a different direction that ultimately saved the county money. And then we repurposed the bond proceeds to do other capital projects that we had previously funded with general fund dollars.
So is there enough money remaining in the bond fund to pay for this?
Yes, the transfers have already taken place. So we're just trying to cross all the T's.
And is there any time limit on when this money needs to be spent by?
There is. So we need to spend at least 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years, which was December of 2017. We did that. We have about $8 million outstanding that has not been spent. Most of that is in the demolition fund. We're trying to spend the hardest hit dollars first, and spending that money is timely anyway, just for the process of getting the proceed orders. And then we have about $1 million or so in encumbrances in the ERP project and another $700,000 in encumbrances in an IT project.
And is there any need that this legislation be passed on second reading suspension?
No.
No. Is there a motion? There is a motion. You made a motion already. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Vice President Jones.
How much is in the hardest hit fund that we have to spend before we get to the $8 million?
So that's really a question for Ken Surratt. I can follow up with you, but I think the county was allocated or expecting to get more than $20 to $30 million in hardest hit funding. What we are trying to do, of course, is spend the federal dollars first. So the county money should be the payer of last resort. That's how it should work. The federal dollars cannot be used for residential, so we are using the county dollars for some commercial properties. So I do anticipate that we will spend our dollars within the year. We have another 2 years to spend the bond proceeds as long as we've spent the 85%. So I don't see an issue with that at all.
Okay.
Councilman Tron.
In fact, the bonds have been sold and the buyers bought them with the specific portfolio statement out there. Does this it ever put in jeopardy anything in regards to the selling of these bonds? Because we're obviously changing the balance and the weighting considerably with the way we're moving this.
Mm-hmm. It does not, to my understanding. This was vetted through law, having the repurpose, and I think that the legislation covers the county, for lack of better terms, for using these dollars for projects that weren't the capital projects. So everything we transferred money for was a capital project. We look at all the projects that we had going, vetted it with everything in the indenture to make sure that we were doing everything on the up and up. I think this legislation covers us for spending it on demolition, non-county buildings.
I understand we maybe ran it past our internal folks in law, but did we run it past the bond? Because it's a unique area of the law that we use bond counsel for to put them out there. We would not use internal counsel to put bonds out there, so I just didn't know if we ran
It did go to bond counsel.
Thank you. That's okay. Not that we don't have qualified people inside. It's just bonds are a special breed.
Yeah, we like second opinions.
Thanks.
Okay, well, there was a motion and a second to move resolution 2018-0010 to the full council for second reading. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. It is recommended.
Thank you.
Okay, that went through relatively expeditiously, so I think that we can do a little more work on the ERP project, and I will call forward Director Dykes. My guess is that we'll probably do the director's presentation and then do Ms. Nappy's presentation at the next meeting would be my guess. Director.
Good afternoon, Council. My presentation will be a little bit shorter. We, in HR, we are just embarking on the ERP. So where Public Works has not only looked at their current state, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and they're already in the process of designing the system or have designing the system along with finance the same, HR is really just starting the process. So we'll go over a couple of things here. I think during the next quarterly update, I will have more definitive information of cost savings and things of that sort. But again, right now, we're just in a preliminary state of HR. So I thought this was an important slide to show you, which is our actual main core unique areas. And what this is this is just a picture of the number of people we have in these areas. And it's also a picture of the significant areas in HR. Now, what I want to point out here is that over the last 2 years, we have actually combined some positions to address, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, to address the areas of needs in HR. So when I first got here, that compensation, that second level there, compensation, that section was not here at the time. Okay, when you look at the last one, the talent acquisition, that section was not here. Although we had people recruiting and placing people in jobs, we needed to go ahead and develop those sections for the simple fact that when I came here in 2016, we had over 450 vacant positions that hadn't been filled. And right now, actively, we've got about 200. So when we start talking about efficiencies, yeah, we could reduce FTEs, but I think that the conversation from an HR perspective is really how are we repurposing these FTEs to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the county. So some of our challenges and some of our opportunities, and I've expressed this to my staff, we have to think differently. I mean, Director Dennis had said that, Director Kennedy has said that, we can't just take what we're doing right now and put it in the current system. And I think in a lot of ways that a lot of organizations do that. They do that and they don't realize the efficiencies. So in our department, it's been a challenge to get people to think differently. I know we do it this way now, but is there a better way to do this? We have to embrace change, which is also a challenge and also opportunity in HR. Staff is used to doing things the way they do it, and they don't want to change that. And so that has been a challenge and also an opportunity. When I was at RTA, when we implemented PeopleSoft, and I was on that implementation team, we actually took our implementation team, which was actually staff, and we moved them to the implementation process. So staff that was on the implementation team no longer did their regular daily job. We brought people in, temporaries in, to do those jobs. A challenge here is that those people that are on the implementation team also have their regular job to do. So that's a significant challenge, and also an opportunity. And then last, and I won't read all of these, last is just there are a lot of distractions. We have all the regular things that we do, getting the data, developing W-2s, developing all the other things that we do. And those become distractions when you look at implementing a system like this. So what's my approach in HR? I encourage my staff to continue to ask questions. And so again, it's easy to just go ahead and say, we want the system to do what we do today. But I encourage my staff to ask why. Who does it benefit? Does it align with policy? We have some conversations of some things that has been a practice of the organization, and it doesn't necessarily align with policy. So does it align with policies? Can Infor do this? What are the best practices? So these are the questions that I challenge my staff to ask. Even with those challenges and opportunities, we continue to ask these questions. So one significant improvement is that we looked at 45, and we looked at many more, but we looked at 45 unique processes. And so these were 45, and they had multiple levels of service deliveries within these processes. And out of that 45, and again, we looked at many more, but I just want to focus on that 45. Out of that 45, we were able to cut those processes down to 25, okay, which is significant. Saves us a lot of time. We can divert those resources other places. One that I like to just mention briefly is the onboarding. So when I first came to the county at the beginning of 2016, Marcel Spencer asked me to come in and fill out paperwork before my first day of hire. It took an hour and a half to almost 2 hours to complete all of the paperwork. There were numerous, I think there were like 70 pieces of paper that I had to fill out. Through this ERP process, even before, we really begin to look at our processes to say, do we need that? All those questions that I noted on the previous slide, this system has encouraged us to do that more. And so again, with that 45 unique processes, we were able to eliminate some, but get that down to 25. And I think that, again, that's what the ERP system is supposed to do. And as I talk more and as I get into the change management, we keep talking about this as an IT project, and it's really not. It's a people and process project. So what is HR service rollout strategy? And there's 3 points here. One, there's a staggered implementation, and we'll talk about exactly what we're implementing in each stage on the following slides. But it's really about learning what we do, because there are some processes that we aren't really aware of what we do. We do them different at this particular HR site, different at this particular site. So learning what we do. Also learning what are best business processes. And then being agile, being able to adjust and move, and then being comfortable with where we are and moving forward with the realization of this transformation. So, as I said when I first started, we are just beginning the process. And I'll go a little bit more in detail here. But right now, for core HR, which includes employee records, absent management, benefits, employee relations, we are at the beginning of the process. So we've looked at the brown paper process. What are we currently doing? And we've completed that. And we've also done the core team training and beginning to do the 2B workshops. Okay, so that's the first module that we're going to look at implementing rather. Talent acquisition is another module. It's actually called talent management. And talent management consists of both the talent acquisition, the recruiting and putting people on payroll, but it also includes the other part of talent management, which is actually the learning management. How are we developing our people? With the talent management, the talent acquisition side, we've finished the brown paper processes. Again, that is, what do we currently do now? And we're in process of the core team training. Now, with the talent management, there has been a change because we were supposed to implement the entire suite of talent management towards the end of this year. We've moved the talent acquisition up. So the talent acquisition, we're looking at really the implementation at the beginning of the third quarter, I believe, of 2018 instead of the last quarter of this year. The last two, go ahead.
What does CRP stand for?
Conference room pilot.
Okay.
Okay. The last two major modules, one is payroll. And as you know, we have a lot of concerns with payroll. We have a lot of different contracts. We have a lot of different data points. A lot of our payroll is done, well, a good portion of our payroll is actually done manually. We have to go in and generate the system. And so there's a lot of mistakes there. So payroll, we are at the point where we've done the brown paper processes, the 2B workshops, and we're doing the requirements fit analysis right now. And then the last section for implementation is the talent management, the learning side. And again, for the learning side, we've just worked on the brown paper processes. So I think this is a critical slide because we keep talking about the efficiencies, and there will be efficiencies throughout this whole implementation. We're going to be able to eliminate process steps. We're going to be able to combine process steps. We're going to look at best practices, which will be efficiencies. But one thing that I keep saying is that, as I said in my second slide that you saw, is that there are areas in HR, and I can't speak to the other areas, the finance area or public works. There are areas that right now, we don't have people in those areas. And we have to, if we really want to look at a modern employment population. And I mentioned too already, compensation. So we have a lot of issues with compensation, but as a county, we never formed a compensation group of experts that could facilitate compensation until I walked in the door. For talent acquisition, we knew we had a lot of job openings. We knew we weren't filling them on a timely basis, but we never developed a group that's just working on talent acquisition, bringing people in, recruiting them, sourcing, getting them employed, getting them on payroll. When you think about 4,800 employees, at any time, we could have 10% of the population that we need to fill those jobs. And we never had a group that was actually focused on them. So these are some of the other HR priorities that, as we move to implementation of the ERP, that we're going to have to see if we're going to staff these, including the analytics. You know, we need to be able to manage and operate on data. And a lot of times we don't. We do it on past practice sometime. We do it because this is what we've always done. But we need, my position is that we need at least one person that's really diving into HR analytics because there's a lot of information. When I came here, I developed metrics. And there's a metrics dashboard. And I think that we have a total of 20-something metrics. So numbers that we're looking at all the time. So we're collecting the data. And now the question is, what are we going to do with that? How are we going to make decisions on that? we need to boost up our training and development. You know, one of the things that we got from some of the managers that we surveyed was that we don't invest in our employees. We don't invest in training. Yes, some of them do get training, but organizational-wide training, which will lead to succession planning and things of that sort, we don't do that. So shifting some of our current staff, training them where they can do these things, I think is going to be very important for the implementation of this ERP system. So, any questions on just the HR side? And I'm going to talk a little bit about our change management initiatives.
My suggestion is to complete the full presentation and then we'll take questions.
Okay.
If you would, please.
All right. So our change management, and so this change management is not just in HR, this is across the organization. And Human Resources is responsible for facilitating the change management for this ERP across the organization. And so what are those ERP priorities as it relates to change management? Well, we have to drive change. I will tell you that I've been involved in 3 implementations, this is my 3rd one, of an ERP system, PeopleSoft at RTA, ADP at the Houghton Arboretum, and at the sewer district, we upgraded and actually utilized the system more when I was at the when I was at the sewer district. And this organization here, for whatever reason, it's very difficult to move people off of what we do now and move them into what we need to do. So driving change is a priority for ERP.
Are you saying more difficult than in the previous 2 places where you worked?
Previous 3, yes. Okay, so we have to drive change. So that's an ERP priority for across the organization. Communicating, because we have various people that don't sit at a computer all day, so they don't have access to the information as it relates to the ERP. Sometimes our communications are too high level and we can't really understand what's going on, or the groups can't understand what's going on. So again, another ERP priority is effective communication. Our just-in-time training. My staff asked in 2017, we know we're going to do the ERP, why can't we get trained now? We didn't want them to lose that information, so a just-in-time training. And you got to remember now, we're going to implement several modules in 2018, throughout 2018 and part of 2019. So it's not like we're going to implement one module. So being able to train all the people that will be affected with this is definitely a priority for our ERP system. Overcoming the challenges, we talked a little bit about that, and the constants for moving forward, I think, is also a challenge. So I've spoke to this a whole lot, but I want to say here, and I want to reemphasize here, that ERP it's not a technology project. It's really the people and process transformation. So what is our change management methodology? How are we moving forward with change management? Well, we developed this with a consultant, this Ready, Stop, Go. And all this simply is saying that, we're going to assess, we're going to recognize all the pain points, we're going to look at all the issues, that's ready, set, we're going to actually design the training, and go is really we're going to administer the training. I spoke about communication before. We have a lot of different areas where we have communicated and employees have access. So we have information available on MyHR. You've heard some about MyHR when Dennis was up here. We have a frequently asked questions that we develop regularly. We have a suggestion box, so if people want to figure out, what's going on, or they'd like to suggest a different way of communications, we have that. We have an email that goes right to the ERP core committee, and we have emails that we receive and we answer. And then again, we have a project drive area where people can look to see what's going on. So far as change management, the process, We have already established the change management network. We have a bunch of change management agents out there throughout the organization. We did an initial change management survey to see how prepared we are with change management. We do have a communication strategy, the slide before where I talked about all the avenues in which we communicate. That's part of our communication strategy. And we do have a Project Drive intranet page where people can dialogue and look at that. And then you'll see the areas in blue, those are in process, the ongoing modules or implementation, the change impact analysis. Those are all things that we're getting ready to do now, or we're in process of doing, along with the training. We're developing training right now. So in closing, this is a people and process transformation. This is not an IT transformation, and I want to keep emphasizing that point. Councilman Strawn, I agree with you. We have to find some efficiencies, and those efficiencies have to look at headcounts. I don't think we're ready for that right now, and I think you've heard that before in the presentation, because there are things that we're not doing that we should be doing, okay? I think that at the end of the day, we will, as Dennis has said, and also as Michael has said, we will be able to realize those efficiencies, and it will be a reduction in headcount. Right now, we can't necessarily determine what that is, because there are things that we aren't doing that we should be doing in order to make this organization the organization that it should be. And so this is the thing that I challenge with my staff all the time, you know. So there are some people in this organization that's sort of sitting on the sidelines when it comes to change. And so this quote says, "Change is disturbing when it's done to us, but when it's exhilarating when it's done by us." So I've encouraged all my staff, since this is really about HR and the overall change management, you know, to not sit on the sidelines, be a part of this change.
Director, can you tell us about the meeting that's going to take place right here this Thursday on the February 1st?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
You're not. I understand there's going to. I was invited to. We'll let Ms. Nappy tell us about this.
Sure, if that's all right, Councilman Miller. So you saw the invitation poster on the wall here, I think on the door entry into the council room. This is called a pit crew, and one of our strategies to really help the communications and liaison of information back and forth between the project team, the business teams, and all employees, all the agencies across the county, and also use that as a two-way communication so that they can bring back information, details to the project team about their needs. We've created this pit crew. And the pit crew is really a team of individuals within agencies that they've either volunteered or they have been volunteered by their chief or their directors. They're folks who are respected within their groups, and they're folks who are able to participate in this pit crew. And what this purpose is to get information out to the employees. So instead of just the team trying to distribute information, as Douglas just noted, through emails, through conversations, we're really trying to get it at the grassroots level of having information and bringing this team of individuals called the pit crew together, providing them with tools, providing them with training, and providing them with resources to be able to go down to their agencies, back to their agencies, and relay the information about the project and vice versa, bring information back to us.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And I would just invite any of my colleagues here to become part of the pit crew and come this Thursday at 10 o'clock, because I think you might learn a whole lot of different kinds of information about the challenges of implementing this ERP project. Councilman Gallagher.
Okay, for the director, although some communications would have been good there.
If there was a project out there that would drive change, make you think differently, save money, payroll, raise morale, streamline services, could you adjust to that program?
Well, absolutely. We would consider it. Absolutely.
Because what I'm going to propose is a people, not a process,
Okay.
and that's a buyout. What's wrong with the buyout?
There's nothing wrong with buyout, Councilman.
Absolutely not. In the history of Cuyahoga County over the past 30 years, every 10 years about they do a buyout. My argument in the budget was, my argument to the executive was, my argument to my colleagues is if you're going to have 10% of the people leave on a buyout, say, that's 10% leaving the doors smiling, singing your praises. But it also allows 10% more people or less, depending on shifting of services and the ERP implementation, to bring new people in. People are looking for jobs. People are looking for careers to serve the public. And I just don't see how that didn't see the light of day. Do you know anything about that?
So evidently you're asking me this question because someone probably suggested that.
Oh, I've heard a lot of things, and I don't believe anything I hear.
Okay.
But when I'm looking at a potential savings in the tens of millions of dollars over 3 years and do exactly what I just said, what you are professing is part of what you want, I'm handing you the golden goose, I think.
And
or am I not?
And I appreciate you handing me the golden goose.
Why don't we get moving on the golden goose?
When we're looking at buyout, there are some things that you should consider, okay? One is that we have not done a good job of preparing the people that are behind us to take over those positions that are critical to this organization. So let me.
I will tell you this, and I have history, and you do not. I do, and you do not. So I think it's important that you hear me.
Okay.
And I watched this happen as an employee of the county. And each and every time they did a buyout, each and every time, it was discussed and implemented within months, not a year. Now you implement it over a period of a year, but the decision was made within months. And you have that year. Are you telling me that there is a position in Cuyahoga County that we can't train somebody over a period of a year to take over that position? I don't think it exists.
Well, I didn't say that.
Okay. Well,
you can train. Yeah, I never said that. You can train everyone. You can train people to do things. But there's a criticalness when it comes to really strategically looking at a buyout. And that's just my opinion.
Okay.
I'm one person here. One thing I think you have to realize is that there are those critical positions that there's just right now one person that understands in totality all the process steps. I would give you one in my office, which is my payroll manager.
Isn't that an indictment on us?
I'm not saying it's not an indictment. What I'm saying is that if you're going to do a buyout, from my experience, you have to make sure that all of these holes are plugged.
How many buyouts have you run?
Just one.
And how long did that take?
It took us about a year to plan before we really implemented it, and we implemented it without any hiccups at all.
Okay. Well, I'm getting off we could talk privately about this because obviously I'm concerned and passionate about this.
Okay.
And I honestly don't see the downside.
Okay.
I've never seen the downside. We have a morale problem here. I think this would go a long way in helping that out. And I think that's one of your goals. You came before us before with that concern. And I think that's important that that's looked at. And anytime we have the ability to move people out that are moving out anyhow, in a 3-year period, if you do a 3-year buyout, those people are leaving. And if we're not preparing them over the period of 30 years for somebody to come in and take their place. That's why I say it's an indictment on us, not you.
You're not going to get an argument out of me there.
It's an indictment on the system.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's where I'm at on that. But I think I make good points in listening to your presentation. And as the ERP moves along, I think it's important that you keep that in the back of your mind, because I am really passionate about doing the right thing here. And I honestly, we're at that 10-year period, close to it. And it's never done anything but made things better in Cuyahoga County.
Okay.
Now, I don't know where you were at, but here we have the data to prove, not suggest, but prove that we have gotten better because of it. So I hate to take up your time with that, but keep that in the back of your mind and we can talk privately.
All right. Sounds good.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any of my colleagues who don't think we've done enough for one day? Hearing none, we're gonna hold Director Nappy's presentation to our next meeting, which I think will be in 2 weeks, and because the time has gone on, and so is that okay? Can you make it? Absolutely. Okay. And has anybody signed in for public comment unrelated to the agenda?
No, no one has signed in.
There being no further business that holds our attention, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, folks, for hanging in there.